perhaps the biggest enigma of the Formula 1 2023 silly season is Lewis Hamilton. With the 7-time world champion yet to sign a new deal for 2024, currently he's not racing on the grid next season. And in today's video, I'd like to explore that. So, as always, if you are new, feel free to subscribe. Welcome everyone to Racing Reviews. And let's discuss this one because Lewis Hamilton once again finds himself halfway through a season without a contract heading into the following year. This is something that's happened on multiple occasions of late, with 2020, him not signing a new deal for 2021 until 1 month before pre-season, and that was only a 1-year extension. And at the end of that season, when everything went down in Abu Dhabi, he only then re-signed for 2022 a few days before pre-season testing. So this isn't a news story in the world of Formula 1, but what it is a crossroads for Lewis Hamilton, because he is now going into his 6th contract with the Mercedes team, and it could even end up being his last ever Formula 1 contract. And it all comes down to, what are the sticking points in this deal? Why has this been rumbling on with speculation for the entirety of the 2023 season so far, but also last year as well? He did sign a 2-year deal. Why has it got to this point where we're at this crossroads? And for Lewis, there are 3 clear options on the table for him. Number 1, stay at Mercedes. Stay at the team where you won 6 of your 7 world titles. Stay at the team that currently looks like one of the best to challenge Red Bull and take them on next year. Yes, there's McLaren, maybe Ferrari if you want to throw them in as well, and Aston Martin, but actually Mercedes are a team that are going to be one of the favourites to take the fight to Red Bull. It's also a team that he knows extremely well. He's the leader of that team. The team really understands the value of the Hamilton brand. It's not just the race driver. His value as a sportsman, as a personality, as an asset, transcends his ability to drive a Formula 1 car. With his own personal pulling power for a brand like Mercedes, whether that's his social media following, whether that's his social status and pulling power for brands like your Tommy Hilfigers, IWCs, Monster Energy, they all add up. He's even added the Denver Broncos to his portfolio, Chelsea Football Club he's a minor investor of as well. You've got Plus 44, his clothing brand, and even the Hamilton Commission helping battle diversity in motorsports. These are all added extras that Mercedes need to consider, whereas with most other drivers, your primary focus and almost the only thing worth talking about, plus sponsors of course, is the talent behind the wheel. And Hamilton is a given that he is one of the best of all time. So you don't have to worry about that. So stay at Mercedes is a choice for Lewis. Mercedes would love to keep him. There are no real drivers in waiting for that seat at the moment. If Lewis was to decide to go elsewhere, or Mercedes had to find a new driver, I know Tomo recently did a video on that, so go and check out that one. But my very quick take on that would be maybe Esteban Ocon, who was a Mercedes junior, managed by Toto Wolff. Maybe bring back Sebastian Vettel, could be quite fun. They do have a reserve driver in Mick Schumacher. Think that would be a step too high for Mick, but don't forget they've got George Russell in that other seat, and he's at a stage where if Lewis was to leave the team, then George, I think, is more than capable to step up to that team lead role. So I don't think that's something they have to worry about realistically, but if you want to know more about that, go and check out Tomo's video. So choice number 1 is to stay at Mercedes. Choice number 2 is to find a new team. Do I think realistically there's a team out there that can tick all the boxes for Lewis Hamilton like Mercedes can? Is there a team that can allow him to be this personality that he is at Mercedes, that's going to allow him to give time to all of his other interests and aspirations, whether that be other sports like the NFL, whether that be music or fashion? Is there going to be another team that allows Lewis those opportunities like Mercedes does? I don't think so. On track though, because that's our primary focus in Formula 1. Is there another team that can build themselves around Lewis Hamilton to give him a car capable of fighting Red Bull And looking up and down the grid, the only one team for next year that can offer him that is in fact Mercedes. So unless you have a real surprise switch deal with a Charles Leclerc, where maybe Hamilton and Leclerc swap teams, or Norris and Hamilton swap teams, that's not happening. And we discussed it the other day on drivers and spaces that are available for next year. The seats just aren't there. And Red Bull are very happy with Max Verstappen, of course they are. Ferrari have an incredible lineup with Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz. McLaren, they're super quick at the moment. Norris is a great driver. Oscar Piastri up and coming, so they're not going to want to change. And then Aston Martin, maybe they'd swap out Lance Stroll for Lewis Hamilton, but would they want Hamilton and Alonso together? I don't think so. Don't think that's the most sensible one in the world, and that is a risk for Lewis Hamilton. There's always been talks that he would love to go to Ferrari, talks at the start of this season that maybe he'll be heading there next year. There could be a swap deal with himself and Charles Leclerc, but otherwise, that's not happening. 2025, when I think there's going to be a lot of movers and shakers in the driver market, different story. But right now, next year, I don't feel that's an option unless he goes to Williams, which is even more unlikely. So the final option is to walk away from Formula One, and we've been circling around it a few times in this video already. This man has a lot of other interests other than Formula One, and he's got all the accolades. The only one he's missing in Formula One is that 8th title to confirm himself as the best as all time. And so the question then becomes, and I think the bigger question to round up this video, is the hunger there? What are his aspirations within Formula One? Because that 8th title is the glaringly obvious thing that he's not got in his armoury. He's got most wins, got most pole positions, got most points in Formula One. The list just goes on and on and on, and the records really do speak for themselves. But for Formula One drivers, Fernando Alonso's a great example. It's more than just the records. It's more than that. And actually, each weekend, it's a fresh start. Don't worry about the last weekend. We're talking about the here and now. And actually, who is the quickest at this track and who is the quickest right now? The past is in the past. Let's talk about this weekend. And that hunger, that fire, yes, I think burns out over time. You saw the likes of Sebastian Vettel the last few years where just that desire wasn't quite there, but it's a different story when you're in the midfield. Lewis is at the front. He's in a car that, give it a few upgrades, a few tweaks, is as quick as that Red Bull. Look at McLaren, a car that was comfortably, I would even argue, at the rear of the midfield at the start of the season. Yet, the last 2 or 3 Grand Prix, they're in the mix for the win, for pole positions. And even Lewis himself, in that Mercedes, scored a pole position at the Hungarian Grand Prix. That's a car, few upgrades, can be fighting the Red Bull. It can, and next year, once they've had another year of development on it, when Red Bull's punishment for breaching the cost cap last year comes into play a little bit more, there's less wind tunnel time for them this year, Mercedes have a good chance. So that hunger that I think was apparent in Hungary, Spa wasn't a great race for them, and actually the porpoising came back, so I wonder how much of an effect that will have on his decision to stay. But Hungary is the example I'm going to use here to round up, to say that Lewis loves his team. His reaction when he got pole position was so genuine. The passion was blatant. To see, it's obvious that this man still wants to be in Formula One. That's not a driver that was complacent with pole. That was a driver desperate to be back on the front row, and a driver who was gutted that he didn't win that Grand Prix. And that shows that you want to be there. That shows you have a passion for the sport, a passion for the team, and I don't think he's going anywhere. It's just whether Mercedes can sort out those details. Can they give him the extra time on those extracurricular activities? Do they want him spending that time on those activities? Can they offer him a contract that's flexible in length? because a 1-year deal doesn't really give us much. A 2-year deal, well, that's when lots of drivers are moving and shaking in 2025. 3-year deal, we're in a whole brand new regulation of car when the likes of Audi come into Formula 1 and Honda are back in Formula 1. So are Mercedes willing to give Lewis those options? And thinking more long term, post Formula 1, what role does Lewis want at Mercedes? Does he want some sort of advisory role like Schumacher when he left Ferrari in 2006? Does he want to be some sort of team principal or team owner? These are the kind of things that Hamilton will have never have had to discuss before, that now that we're getting into those closing stages of his career, now that he's got to think about life beyond Formula 1, they're the sticking points. And so it's taking a while for this contract to be signed. I believe it will at the end of this season, but I've got a funny feeling it will be Lewis's last in Formula 1.